In the summer of 2008, The Dark Knight is released, and it breaks every record it could touch. It is even being reviewed as one of the highest rated films of all time, while also being a successful sequel to The Batman Begins. But only 3 weeks after The Dark Knight is released, it already had some complaints. And its complaints were kind of dressed up as a compliment in a way. They would call The Dark Knight a tremendous crime film. Later in their complaints would say, "This isn't really a Batman film though. This isn't Gotham. Where did the comic book go?" Even saying everything is a little too plain. 18 years later, we are seeing the same complaints about the Odyssey. The words are barely changed. Where did the source material go? Where are the gods? And the thing is, these complaints are accurate. Christopher Nolan tends to try to strip away a lot of the impossible stuff. This is precisely why both films work. Christopher Nolan casts out the gods. This is a fair criticism. Athena doesn't fill the role that classically she does in the Odyssey. Poseidon's grudge, which is the engine of the classic poem, is seen pretty much as just weather in Nolan's depiction. If the story was supposed to be about divine intervention, that's a pretty big vandalism on the original story, or at least it should be. But here's the thing. Here's the main question. If Nolan keeps removing what was agreed to be the main points of all these films, why are they so successful? Why do people enjoy it so much? Let's go back to Gotham and see what Nolan removed in order to create his story. This is in 2005 when Christopher Nolan talks about the version of Batman he was inheriting after Tim Burton's version.
Tim Burton's vision of Batman I thought was extraordinarily stylized, quite brilliant actually, and very visionary, but extremely idiosyncratic and stylized. And what it denied me that I'd seen in the comics was the notion of Batman standing out against his environment, a relatively ordinary environment, so that the citizens of Gotham are as amazed by this iconic figure as the audience is.
Burton's Gotham was a painting. It was almost straight out of a comic book. Everything on the screen was stylized. The costumes, the characters, the entire setting. But when everything is stylized, the man in the Batsuit doesn't stick out as much. If you put the Batman in a city that feels like our cities that we are used to, it can't be questioned he will stick out. The strangeness of the situation lands also on the citizens in Gotham, just like it does if you were at your home. Nolan believes this makes a more extreme journey when reality is somehow in the center.
So why do they call him the Joker? I heard he wears makeup. Makeup? Yeah, to scare people. You know, war paint.
This similar instinct created one of the greatest villains of all time.
The purple suit, could he not have the green hair? Could it be, something more pedestrian, more everyday? And once you strip away those elements of the iconography, it's not the Joker anymore, we found. And so we wound up building back towards this quite flamboyant character. But the way in which we chose to bury it is to have that anti-dandy, if you like, that you get from the sort of punk sensibility, this idea that the clothes are grubby and degraded, as if he wears the same thing the whole time, as if he's been out all night.
They took everything away. They stripped the Joker down to where he wasn't the Joker anymore and built back up. They gave him the coat, but it came back grimy. They gave him the makeup, but it seems to be applied that morning. The makeup and face, it comes from someone who is disturbed. It starts coming off later in the day throughout the fights. It seems like someone could actually do this.
What have you done with him?
Me? I was right here. Who did you leave him with?
I knew it was open for a fresh interpretation, and I also instantly kind of had something up my sleeve, which happened to be exactly what Chris was kind of looking for. We sat down and kind of shared ideas, and they were the same, and so we just went with it.
You could call this the Nolan test. He strips everything down. He removes everything impossible from the story and sees what remains. What refused to leave. Whatever is still standing is what the story was all about. But the Batman, that's fine. There's so many iterations of Batman. There isn't one source material in which you could betray. But the Odyssey has an original. In a 3,000-year-old story, the impossible stuff isn't just different stylized artwork. It is the main plot. 10 days before the Odyssey was released, Nolan said this.
You know, it's Homer, it's the Odyssey. It's the sort of thing where when we looked at how we were going to make this film, we wanted it to be earthy and accessible and grounded. And so talking to the actors, I was like, well, we're not all going to do British accents. You know, we're not going to do the sort of Hollywood of the 50s and 60s thing. We want to try and make something a bit more sort of immediate.
As for the gods, Christopher Nolan looked to Kurosawa. In the film, the wind seems to be what passes judgment onto the characters. And this highly influenced Christopher Nolan for the Odyssey. Poseidon is the weather. He is the storms. He is the cloud on the horizon, the pressure on the boat.
One of the things I learned from my good friend Guillermo del Toro is a monster is never just a monster. And if you can look at these creatures with some kind of individuality, if they can have a presence behind them, a personality, they're going to mean more in the film.
Even the Cyclops passes Nolan's test.
There's a lot of, the Count of Monte Cristo, things like that. This kind of part of the story where the hero is forced or has to, abandon his kingdom, if you like, and discover himself, and then returns changed.
A king in exile. Now we can hold that phrase for 21 years and see history repeat itself. Here's the second clip from this summer.
It's a foundational literary epic of Western literature, and so in adapting it, I found all of my previous films. I found the homecoming narrative from Inception and Interstellar. I found the hero's journey from the Dark Knight trilogy. The war story from Dunkirk. I mean, so much of what I've been doing in movies in some way comes from this story. So yeah, it did feel, that felt comfortable to me. It gave me confidence that I knew how to tell this story.
Where does the Dark Knight leave Batman? Running from police, running from dogs, exiled away from where he protected. As a hero, he cannot return as himself.
They need you right now. When they don't, they'll cast you out. Like a leper.
Now look to Ithaca. Odysseus finally returns home and must maintain a lie, a fiction, of who he is for his safety and for the betterment of the kingdom. We can see Nolan's strip test work across many genres and can apply it ourselves. Find your character in whatever concept or genre they are in. Strip out all the concept and all the genre work. The dragons, the powers, the gods, the heist, the impossible. Now look at your character. What do they want? What do they need? Are they interesting if they just remain in a kitchen having a conversation? Every piece of spectacle you add will then enhance the story, enhance the entertainment, but still will have a solid base of character. Both films have fair critiques. If you are a fan in which you want to see a certain iteration of a story and you do not get that iteration, it is disappointing. But there are moments in Nolan's films he captures because those impossibilities were diminished. The conversation of Odysseus and Penelope at the end of his film is not about a man talking about fighting against gods to get home, but of the consequence of harming civilization by breaking the golden rule. So for the comments, which one needed the grounding? Gotham, with its 50 years of incredible artwork and fantastical villains, or the 3,000-year-old story of the Odyssey with all the pantheon of gods? My next video is going to be on the career of Christopher Nolan. So if you want to watch that, it's either done or stay tuned to get that done. I think that's an interesting story from his early films to his most recent work. All right, thanks. Bye.